What's up everybody, Dan here with Dan and Sarah Makers, and we are coming at you with another Tool Tuesday video. And just please, if you haven't done it already, click that subscribe button and subscribe to our channel. It really actually helps us a lot. So if you haven't done it yet, like 90% of the people that watch this channel, go ahead and do it. Help us out. So today we are looking at the Makita 1/2" impact wrench. This is the high torque impact wrench. It is the XWT08. It is part of the 18-volt lithium-ion line that Makita has. I don't believe they've come out with a 40-volt version of this yet, but this is a pretty beefy impact wrench. It definitely will do what you need it to do, most likely. So overall, it's let me get some of the information out of the way. It's got an 18-volt brushless motor, so it runs a little bit cooler, runs a lot longer, it's a lot more efficient on the batteries. It has 3 speeds, which are actually on the top of the grip just above the battery, so you can select both speed and impacts per minute. So those run 900 RPM and 1800 beats or impacts per minute, 1000 RPMs and 2000 beats per minute, and then 1800 RPMs with 2200 beats per minute. The third high speed is the only one where it isn't twice the impacts per minute of RPMs. It is, let's see, 7.9 pounds with the battery, so it's not super light, but it's not extremely heavy. I've dealt with some pretty heavy impact wrenches, mainly air-powered ones in the past, big Ingersoll Rand ones. It has a 1/2" anvil, and it's got a hog ring or retaining ring on it. It makes for changing out bits or sockets fairly easy because they just slide on and slide on off, and it's kind of a friction fit. It does not have a detent pin, which those are very positive in that they hold the socket on there. There's not much that's going to happen that will make the socket fall off, short of taking a piece of wire or nail or a screwdriver or something and getting down in there and pushing that detent pin, then pulling the socket off. So it could be good for some people, but it might be bad in other cases. Sometimes you get a gungy bolt on a lug nut or something like that, and it sticks in your wrench, and you pull the wrench off the lug nut or the bolt, and the socket stays on and doesn't stay on the wrench itself. So that might be a negative. You might want to have that socket stay on the wrench, and you can use the whole wrench to pull the socket off the nut if you wanted to. So that's one little drawback in some people's minds, and a plus in other people's minds. It is pretty impressive in its ratings. I have no way personally of testing to these values. They say in the fastening or forward torque, it will do 740 foot-pounds for the fastening, and then to loosen or breakout force, it's got 1180 foot-pounds of loosening force. That's great when you've got, again, like a lug nut that's seized up, you know, maybe you had it on all winter on a tire or something, and snow and salt and grime and things like that have locked it on there really well. It is assembled in the USA. It doesn't say assembled in the USA of US and foreign parts. It just says assembled in USA. So I would assume that there are a lot of foreign parts that go into it, but it is made here in the US, or built in the US. And then one of the unique features on this is that the actual battery, where it mounts, there's a vibration isolation joint. So the actual bottom of the tool wiggles around with the battery. That is to help isolate the battery and the sensitive electronics and connections in there from the actual impact wrench itself. So if you're really hitting on something hard, that saves your battery a little bit. So that's a nice feature. It's got rubber armor around it, and it's got a pretty heavy-duty rubber nose cone. I heard that it's removable for cleaning. I don't know if you got grease all over the place for that reason, but to me, it doesn't come off easily enough to feel like it would just slip off and slip back on. There might be some adhesive under there, just kind of holding it in place. So overall, it's beefy, it's heavy duty, it's got 2 LED work lights, which is nice when you're crawling up under something and being able to see what you want to see. It's got a very large hook that comes with it. It's probably about 2.5 inches wide, so it's a very wide hook, so it's not something that you'd hook on your belt. this would probably pull your pants down if you weren't wearing suspenders. So just by the weight. So it does come with that. A few of the things that I'd like to talk about for bolts, there are recommended bolt settings or torque fastening ranges for different diameter bolts of different types. So I'll run through them real quick. For grade 5 and grade 8 bolts, which are probably what people typically would be exposed to, there's a plain coarse thread. In a grade 5 bolt, it will fasten correctly up to a 1-inch bolt at 644 foot-pounds of torque. If you're dealing with a plated bolt, which would be like a galvanized bolt, electro-galvanized or zinc-coated or whatever, a smooth-coated bolt, it'll do up to a 1 1/8 inch diameter. For grade 8 bolt, slightly stronger bolt, in the plain finish, it'll do up to a 7/8 bolt, so slightly smaller diameter than the grade 5, and it'll do up to 1 inch in the grade 8 bolt. So as you can see, there's a little bit of offset because they require different torque settings to actually fasten the bolt correctly. As far as structural bolts, you know, these are A325, ASTM A325 bolts. 325s and A490s are the typical ones that you're going to see, at least from my personal experience in structural steel work. These are TC bolts or torque control bolts where there's a shear nut or a shear pin on the end of the bolt. That takes a specialty type of torque wrench fastener. Basically, it's a socket where it holds the spline end of the bolt down in the deep part of the socket and holds it, and then the nut is spun on the outside, and when it hits that torque, it shears that pin off the end. So these are some small ones. They're A325s. For that type of rating, in a plain bolt, which is kind of like this, these are lubricated. There's like 300 pages in the structural steel manual on bolting and specifications for bolts. But this will run up to a 7/8 inch to the proper torque rating. And then for a galvanized and waxed or lubricated, it'll do up to a 1 1/8 inch bolt in the A325s. In the A490s, they're a little bit stronger. For a plain, it will also do the 7/8 bolt, but it's kind of hitting on the low end of its torque setting, which is 715 to 860 foot-pounds of torque to set them. If you deal with the lubricated, it'll go up to a 1-inch bolt easily, but not 1 1/8. So it's got kind of a range that it'll secure properly. Don't misunderstand me. This is not an impact wrench that would be good for structural steel actually when it's engineered and tested. This is not anywhere near precise enough to pass like a Skidmore test, where you're actually calibrating your impact guns or your torque wrenches to make sure that you're fastening your nuts and bolts correctly. So, but this will get them up there. It'll fasten them, so if you're rattling on, you know, farm equipment, or you don't really care about torquing things down correctly at the very end, it'd be great. If you're fastening to wood, that would also work too. So, just for fun, I don't have a lot of sockets that are big enough for the really large diameter bolts, but I am able to get an 1 1/8 inch socket that will work for a 3/4 inch grade 5 bolt here. So we're gonna have a little fun. This is our test piece of wood that we typically cut slices out of for our saw comparisons, but we're gonna put this bolt through this 3/4 inch grade 5, like I said. Got some washers and a nut, and we are gonna see what we can do to crush the board. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. There's not a lot of material on either side of the board left after I drilled a 3/4 inch hole, but we're gonna see what we can do. It might be kind of fun. It might crush it, it might fold it, it might not do anything, it might just flatten the washers out into the wood. So let's see what we can do here. Well, yeah, that might have run out of threads. So that pulled the bolt head into the wood quite a ways on both sides. It started bowing it out. So that definitely kept rattling away. It was slowing down, but it was still turning very, very slowly. So let's see what we can do with loosening. We'll see how. That's not too hot. That might be a little bit hotter. It's a little burr on the end of the nut. Threads are definitely warm. I don't think I bottomed it out. I might have, the wrench might have popped off because it was recessing itself a little bit too deep there. But yeah, that definitely squashed up the wood pretty good on that bolt. So that, I'm happy with that. So my takeaway for this, it's a bit heavy, but it definitely does what you need it to do. Air pneumatic impact wrenches are notorious air hogs. So if you're going around putting down sill plates and you have a bunch of anchor bolts, foundation anchor bolts that are cast into concrete, and you're putting down sill plates and you've got nuts all the way around the perimeter of your building, if you've got structural hold downs, things like that, where you need to run nuts down fast, a job site compressor, typically it'll run nail guns, but it will not run pneumatic impact wrenches very well for very long. You'll have to wait for the compressor to catch up. So an electric one definitely, I would say, is the way to go in my opinion. I've been around those DeWalt corded impact wrenches, the 1/2-inch ones with the rocker switch on it. They do okay, but they don't seem to do as good as some of the cordless impacts do for some reason. I've worked around pipe crews where they do the Megalug clamps or rings where they have all the shear bolts that you have to shear off, and there are tons of those when you start getting into T's and crosses and fittings, and they would tighten them down with the DeWalt electric corded impact wrench, and then they'd come back through with a cordless. So these hit a little bit harder, surprisingly enough, but it just might be how old the corded tool was. I don't know. So as far as my takeaway from this, I would probably be using this a lot on, say, lug nuts, taking wheels on and off. I'd probably be using it for foundation bolts, for large hardware. If I had lag bolts that I needed to drive, this would definitely be the way to do it. It might crush smaller wood components, or you just have to feather it. Just make sure you don't go too much. As you saw, it definitely can sink in washers with 3/4-inch bolts, no problem. So it's definitely a beneficial tool to have. I've wanted an impact wrench for a long, long time. I only have pneumatic ones, and so having an electric cordless one that works with the Makita system, in my opinion, is a win all around. A little bit of vibration, but I can deal with that. So anyways, like I said, you can follow us on Instagram at Danicera Makers. Also, be sure to hit that subscribe button, like, comment. Give us your input information if you've got experience with this as a mechanic, as an iron worker, as a general construction or homesteader. You know, give us your input. Let us know what you like or don't like about this tool, and we can all learn from that. So until next time, this is Dan with Danicera Makers. Have a good one. Bye.